Thank you for joining us today, and it's so great to see so many of you with us online. My name is Sheena Fitzpatrick, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for LITH in the Heartland. Before we begin with today's presentations, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering on traditional Treaty 6 territory and that we respect the histories, languages, and cultures of the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities today. So as many of you may know, LITH in the Heartland is a partnership between 4 local organizations that came together in a coordinated effort to improve resident awareness, enhance access to information and resources, and to facilitate connections about topics related to existing Heartland operations. So one of our goals is to bring residents, local businesses, and municipalities together with industry so that you can all be more informed about what is happening in your community. Today's Spring Industry Update welcomes 4 presenters from Dow, Shell, Government of Alberta, and Inter Pipeline, who will each deliver an update on some of their recent projects and activities happening in Alberta's industrial heartland. At the end of today's program, we will likely have a few minutes for Q&A, so you can submit questions 2 ways, either by emailing your questions to info@lithintheheartland.com, or there is also a live Q&A function within Zoom. So if you have a question, please feel free to type in the Q&A box at any time, but we will address questions at the end of all of the presentations. And if we likely won't have time to address all of the questions today, but anything that we don't get a chance to answer, we will post onto our website after the event, so you can check back and view copies of the presentations, a recording, and then answers to all of the questions that were submitted. So with that being said, we'll get started. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, and I will turn it over to Michael from Dow.
Thank you, Shayna. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to make sure I try to do this correctly. So can everyone see the presentation that I've just pulled up? Oh, no, I can't.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Shayna, for the invitation and hosting the Spring Industry webinar today. So before I start, I just want to just give everybody, let everybody know that we do have a public address test on Wednesdays. And so if you hear any alarms going off, I'm just going to mute at that time. It's only a couple of seconds, and then I'll get back to the presentation. So the joys of being on a manufacturing site. So first of all, thank you, LITH in the Heartland, for all the work that you're doing to keep our communities engaged and connected. And my name is Michael Liu, the Public Affairs Lead for Dow in Alberta, and I'm delighted to join you today. So today I'd like to give you an update on some of Dow's recent activities and just highlight some things that we're working on for this year. And you may have heard about the net zero expansion that was announced last fall, which will be a big win for our community. So I'll provide a quick update on that. And with that project, I'll also like to speak a little bit about our role in building a circular plastics economy as part of our sustainability journey. I'll also highlight some of the community partnerships in Fort Saskatchewan and the Heartland region. And lastly, very exciting for us, it's Dow's 125th birthday this year. So I'll be talking a little bit about that as well. So before I begin, just some legalese that I have to cover. I will be sharing some forward-looking information in today's presentation. And all of the information presented today is based on our current expectations and assumptions about the future. And they involve risks and uncertainties. So we can't guarantee the forward-looking statements and the accuracy going forward. We also reference some GAAP financial measures, and no final investment decision has been made. So now that that's out of the way, I'd like to start my update today by maybe taking a moment to look back at where DAO came from. And in addition to being a big anniversary year for us, this year is also DAO's 61st year of operations in Fort Saskatchewan. And I took a look at our archives and found some historical photos from our very earliest days. And on the left, you can see the road that became Highway 15, taken from a site survey from 1959. And on the right, you see our site entrance from 1962. I don't know if you can see it, but the maple leaf is not actually even on the Canadian flag back then. So we've come a long way, and so has the whole region. And fast forward to where we are today. So this past October, you may have heard that DAO announced plans to build the world's first net zero carbon emissions complex here in Fort Saskatchewan. And we anticipate that this expansion will really triple our capacity here for polyethylene and ethylene. Our existing site assets will also be upgraded. So we'll be on a net zero site when this project is completed, thanks very much in part to the CO2 carbon capture and sequestration infrastructure here. And the project will build on the recent success of some of DAO's work in Texas, the Texas 9 cracker in Freeport, which produces up to 60% less carbon than the average cracker right now. And so then this one will be even more efficient than that. The timeline is going to be fairly long term, and we think it's going to really take, anywhere until the end of this decade, probably to 2030 for it to be completed. No final investment decision has been made yet. And of course, it still needs to be approved by DAO's board of directors and of course the regulatory agencies. We will be sharing a few more details at the Fort Saskatchewan Trade Show next weekend. So if you're in town, please come by and check out our booth. And I should mention, we do have a name for it now, and it's going to be called the Fort Saskatchewan Path to Zero expansion. And that term Path to Zero is something that you'll see from DAO for many of our site expansions all around the world as we look to decarbonize. So I want to speak quickly about why DAO chose Alberta. There are really, I would say, three key advantages here. So the first is the competitive feedstocks. The availability of the feedstocks really is one of the biggest factors. And the government partnership and support that DAO has found has also been a key advantage. And that goes on either side of the aisle. I think we all recognize that industry projects like this are for the best interests of Alberta. And of course, as mentioned earlier, the access to the carbon sequestration infrastructure has made a big difference to our decision to build it in Fort Saskatchewan. Alberta is not the only place in the world that has carbon capture and storage, but it is one of the few places that where the infrastructure is ready and safe and reliable, and we have it in our backyard. So this shared an article here in Chemical Engineering News, which explores a lot of the projects, not just ours, but industry expansions that were made possible thanks to the CO2 infrastructure. And with that, we also need to be mindful of the impact of plastics on our environment and society, and what is really DAO's role and the role of companies like DAO in shaping that impact. So our main product here is polyethylene plastic, and we believe that plastics will continue to be an essential material for the things that we use every day. And DAO is really focused on serving the growth that's going to be needed in the global economy in the future. And this expansion will come in to help meet that growing demand worldwide. And in many instances, plastic is actually the least carbon intensive material that is durable and safe and flexible enough that meets our needs. So we do believe that it is still going to be essential, and plastics will help us transition also to a low carbon economy. And I just want to share one example of that, which is when you look at, say, a wind turbine, they're on average about 17 tons. Well, about 7 tons of that is plastic. So it will have a role to play as we transition to a low carbon or even a zero carbon economy. So the key is how do we produce plastics more sustainably? And really what's needed is to close the loop and prevent plastic from ending up in the landfill and the environment. Here in Alberta, we're collaborating with our partners, our partners at IPL and NATE, to address microplastic pollution in the North Saskatchewan River. And this is part of a partnership called the Plastics Research in Action Partnership. And I really encourage you, if you're interested in it, to go to nate.ca/PRIA, PRIA, to learn about this and other projects in the region. And over the long term, when the Alberta expansion is complete, our site will also help Dow decarbonize about 20% of our global ethylene, reduce net carbon emissions by about 30% by 2030, and become net zero by 2050. And on top of that, we've also committed to removing about 1 million metric tons of waste, including plastic waste, from the environment by 2030. And you'll see some local examples of that shortly. So moving on to the community side, we're very committed to continuing to play an active role to shape the communities where we live and work. Our employees have been very fortunate to be part of this community for over 6 decades. And through charitable investments, employee volunteerism, and partnerships, we're here for the long run, and we want to make a meaningful impact. My colleague Alana Seymour is our corporate volunteer manager, and she leads a lot of the efforts for Dow in the Heartland region. And in fact, she's actually at the United Way Heartland Challenge announcement right now, actually. And here on the slide, you can see some of the community initiatives that we've been part of in the past. So last month, our site director, Don Cameron, accepted a Distinguished Industry Partner Award from NATE, which celebrates that partnership, which has been in place for several decades. And last year, we also, our employees also contributed more than 3,000 hours to the community in the form of volunteerism and about $500,000 in total donations. And this year we have a special milestone to celebrate as well, as it's our 125th anniversary. It's also Dow's 80th anniversary in Canada, and the founder of the company, Herbert Dow, was in fact Canadian. So there's some more historical trivia for us here. And to help celebrate this milestone, our employees will be volunteering at a global day of service on May 26th, and that will happen at the fort and also at every Dow location. So planning is underway, and stay tuned. We'll announce more details as the event is confirmed. To complement this, we're running a contest here locally to encourage community members like you to do our part to make our communities a better place. So this spring, we're launching a contest where you can win a rain barrel kit for your garden. Just plan a cleanup event in your neighborhood, tag us on Facebook, and you could be entered to win. And you'll be able to see the prize next week at the trade show as well. And lastly, I want to give a quick plug to some of the upcoming events and initiatives. So as mentioned, we'll be at the Fort Saskatchewan Trade Show next weekend. You can also catch Dow Farmers Market and Canada Day this summer. And our community cleanups will continue year round. So May 26th might be the first one, but they will go on throughout the year. And lastly, I just want to congratulate NCIA, the Northeast Capital Industrial Association, for celebrating its anniversary this year. So look for some great announcements coming from NCIA as well. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I encourage you to follow us on social, or if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you again, Shayna, for the invitation and the opportunity to share an update. We look forward to updating the community again very soon.
Great, thank you, Michael. I would like to now turn it over to our next presenter. So please let me introduce Mark Pattenden, General Manager with Shell.
Hi, how's the sound coming through, Sheena?
You sound great.
Fantastic. Okay, so yeah, my title's rather long, but yeah, I do run Scotford, but I'm also the Senior Vice President for Shell Canada, which also covers our downstream business in Canada, as well as the Sarnia site in Ontario. So really delighted to be here and just to talk a little bit about where we're at Scotford specifically. So just a reminder, of course, a very large complex just north of Fort Saskatchewan. And you know, we have chemical plants, refinery, upgraders, and we also have, of course, the what I would describe as the crown jewel of the Quest carbon capture and storage, as well as a new solar facility, which I'll talk about in a little while. We have a very efficient complex. We have 1,300 employees and around 400 embedded contractors typically. For the last month and for probably another month or so, we have a major shutdown. So think of it like a major overhaul of your car, where we have an additional 2,400 people on site while we take one of the two upgraders down for its maintenance, which we do typically every 5 to 6 years. So we have great people, and of course, it's not just about doing what we're doing today, but how we will take things forward. Shell Scotford has been around since 1985, and you know, we believe and we want to be here for many decades to come as a very successful part of a thriving community in the heartland. So just to talk a little bit about the Shell Energy and Chemicals Park at Scotford. So this is one of 5 energy and chemical parks in Shell worldwide. There is one on the Gulf Coast in Louisiana. There are 2 in Northwest Europe, in the Netherlands and Germany, and there's another one in Singapore in Asia. So specifically to Scotford, we have one of the most energy efficient refineries in the world, and it's actually Canada's most energy efficient refinery. But not only that, we now recognize and we are part of the energy transition, which of course Canada is committed to net zero by 2050, and so is Shell. And that's not just our own emissions, but also moving at the pace of society to decarbonize the energy system in its entirety. So it is important when we think about the emissions that around about 10% of the total emissions are from our own site, and around 90% are from our customers, the products that they use, whether that's at retail sites or commercial customers, etc. And so it's important that we work very closely with our customers as we decarbonize the energy system in Canada. And part of that strategy by 2030, so 20 years before the net zero commitment, we have a commitment across Shell to decarbonize using carbon capture and storage around 25 million tons of CO2 by 2030. And of course, Scotford is an integral part of that. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. So you may have heard the announcement by the government of Alberta, and I'm delighted that Shell Scotford was selected as one of the proponents. There's 6 proponents for future carbon capture and storage and CO2 storage hubs. And of course, we're building off the success of Quest. Quest has been around now for 7 years, and we just achieved 7 million tonnes. And we've been able to show that with the infrastructure from the time we capture it to the time we put it 2 kilometres underground in the pore space, as we call it, we've been able to do that for considerably lower cost than we originally estimated. And of course, as we develop now the Atlas Carbon Storage Hub, which was previously called Polaris, we will be looking at a first phase, working with our partners, somewhere between 750,000 to 850,000 tonnes a year, with an ambition as a carbon storage hub, working with our partners, Suncor and ATCO, to actually build this out to 10 million tonnes per annum over time. So very, very significant compared to Quest. You can see 10 times more than Quest, and certainly phase 1 of Atlas, just under 1 million tonnes to decarbonise the refinery very significantly at Scotford, taking out around 40 to 50% of the emissions of the refinery, what we call Scope 1, as well as a similar amount from our chemicals plant as well. So exciting times. And of course, a lot of work to be done, working closely with the government of Alberta to actually land and agree all the terms under which we will operate safely and reliably this new CO2 storage hub, and of course also the joint venture that we will be working on to work together with Suncor and ATCO on the same opportunity. So exciting times, and the anticipation at this stage indicatively is we should take a final investment decision on this project sometime in the course of 2023. But we already see momentum building since the announcement from the government of Alberta, and it gives us confidence to continue driving this project forward, which, if we look at the various phases and we compare to what we did with Quest, this should provide construction jobs, around 3,000 to 4,000 jobs over the duration of the construction of this next opportunity. And each phase, indicatively, a similar number of jobs as we go from phase 1 through to the ultimate potential of the hub, around 10 million tonnes. Not only that, I also want to highlight that we're very focused on not only the resource-rich nature of the fact that there's this huge underground reservoir where we can store CO2, and there's another part to this, which is that we will also decarbonize the energy we import into Scotford, and that's through abundant natural resources like wind and solar. So with wind and solar, I want to talk about 3 specific opportunities. So the first one is, if you drive up Highway 214 and you come to the intersection of 220 next to the northern side of Scotford, you will actually see a solar farm which is now running. It's around 5 megawatts, and that was an $11 million investment jointly with the government of Alberta. We announced it in November 2021, and I'm proud to say in February 2022, so just under a year later, we've been able to produce our first power, our green power, into chemicals. And even on a winter's day, when we first started in February, we're already producing 4 megawatts in the late afternoon. So quite incredible that even in the winter, solar, when it's sunny, and of course Alberta and specifically the Heartland have a lot of sunshine hours, some of the highest sunshine hours in Canada. This is going to be a fabulous resource going forward. So with that success, we announced that we will now build a much bigger solar farm, and this will be 58 megawatts, so more than 10 times larger than the 5 megawatt solar farm. And this jointly with our partner, Silicon Ranch, their first solar facility in Canada. We announced this last year, and we expect construction to start this spring. And we should see, again, the first green power from this facility flowing into our refinery by the end of 2023. So very significant decarbonisation of our facilities with green power. And lastly, and not least, the abundant wind resources. For any of you who have been into the southern part of Alberta, Waterton, you'll know it's very windy down there. And we have an agreement with a company called Blue Earth Renewables to buy 50 megawatts of power from them from sometime in 2022. The deal we announced actually in April 2021. This wind facility will actually produce around 100 megawatts. So there's 50 megawatts that will go to others, but we will take 50 megawatts of that. And construction of this project is ongoing. It's in totality, when we look at the green power, on average over any given year, it's not every day that it's very windy, and it's not every day that's sunny, but more often it is more sunny or windy than, let's say, weather, for example, in British Columbia and Vancouver, for example. We will actually be able to reduce the carbon footprint of our imported power by around 50% on average over the typical year. And on a windy, hot summer's day, that will be closer to 100%. So super proud of what is happening from the work that we've done with many of our colleagues across Shell to enable these three opportunities. And of course, I think the important part for me is these are key steps on our way to be an energy and chemicals park. And so I've talked about green power, I've talked about carbon capture and storage, but also we are looking at other opportunities and ideas going forward, including potentially biofuels, as well as decarbonized chemicals, which of course we produce today in their so-called grey form. So it's exciting times, a lot is happening, and a lot will continue to happen over the next period of time. Happy to take any questions later on, and that's it from me for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for that really great update on what's happening over with Shell. So now we will hear from John with the Government of Alberta for a special update on the Heartland's designated industrial zone. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Sheena, and thanks very much for having me today. I'll just get to sharing my screen here. Okay, give this. Perfect. Okay. So thanks again for having me today. I've got the privilege to lead the coordination of the Designated Industrial Zone pilot project, and really the project is set on the shoulders of the great work that's already been achieved in the industrial heartland over several decades with cumulative effects management and innovative approaches being taken going back to 2007 and prior to that, where we saw many synergies of industry working together to achieve not just environmental outcomes, but also those synergistic benefits of co-locating with purpose. And the Designated Industrial Zone project is really the first of its kind, I think, in Alberta to take a hard look at regulatory efficiency, effectiveness, and focus on outcomes, both from an environmental perspective as well as creating competitive advantage for the province. So there are three main components to the pilot, and one of those key ones is really regulatory performance and identifying those critical policy shifts necessary to reduce timing in terms of the in-process time for applications, and also the regulatory certainty for statutory decision making. And those two components have been identified as problematic, and also in some cases deterrences in making investment decisions in Alberta, as well as things that industry that already are in Alberta are considering in terms of, are they staying or not? So we're looking to reduce costs to industry, increase our own regulatory performance internally, of course, and increase effectiveness of those decisions moving ahead. And this work also dovetails well with the digital regulatory assurance system that'll really modernize regulatory implementation in Alberta government and specifically environment parks moving forward. Part of that, a big part of that is also really the development of a unique framework for the designated industrial zone, and you'll see some pieces of that in what's been produced shortly. And ensuring that we also have that alignment with our municipal partners and working with AIHA and our member municipalities to ensure we don't have duplication, overlap, and sort of a stacking of timelines. On environmental outcomes, we've got a couple of feasibility studies that have actually, one's been completed now, which is our water feasibility study, which looks at both water allocation, distribution, and wastewater management in the zone. And our other feasibility study is focused on air quality and air management. And that'll be finalized here. We're aiming at the end of April, early May for that one. Essentially, the environmental outcomes stream is really focused on ensuring that we're achieving our environmental outcomes and we're not lowering the bar. I guess what we've seen in both internally and external engagements too is really the term industrial zone can come with some negative connotations around, and specifically from our environmentally considerate stakeholders that we're somehow lowering the bar on environmental standards, and that's definitely not the case. In fact, we're aiming to ensure that we've got really strong stringency for our environmental management programs, and also we've got outcome-based management approaches that work with the regulatory system. In terms of cluster infrastructure, and this is where we're looking at that regional water supply and access to processed water across the designated industrial zone. We're also looking at electricity and the need for export of electricity, whether that's across the road or 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers down the road, and looking at those pieces, how we currently manage and treat wastewater, and what the approach is relative to what we would see maybe needed approaches into the future as we see build out of the industrial zone. Improved topsoil management, as many of our industrial stakeholders, as well as our municipalities that we're working with, have seen the needed shifts in how we manage topsoil to both conserve it as a resource and also allow flexibility in how we manage it. And these components really taken together are anticipated to set the environment for competitive advantage for Alberta and the industrial heartland, as well as generate learnings for how do we apply this in other areas of the province potentially down the road. So what this slide really shows is the work plan and milestones essentially at a high level as we move from our first sets of deliverables and moving out beyond September 2022, which is when we get more into the operational phase of the pilot. Starting with our criteria and operational policies, you'll notice we've already completed and published minimum criteria requirements for a designated industrial zone. In this particular case, these apply only to the industrial heartland, but are expected to go beyond that with further engagement and consultation with other municipalities across Alberta in the future. We've streamlined the PIA renewal requirements for facilities within the designated industrial zone, and this will apply both to AEP and AER regulated facilities, moving that timeline from about 18 months down to 6 months or less. Applicant advisory service has been implemented to ensure that we've got good communication with our regulatory advisors, with prospective industries, as well as industry that's looking to clarify some of those regulatory pieces that perhaps were less certain in the past, and now we can shine a lot more light on those pieces. And we've also made effective the topsoil management guideline, which provides that flexibility in terms of using topsoil as a resource, and establishes a minimum bar essentially that's reasonable for maintaining topsoil for use in reclamation and other purposes. In June, we're going to see the operational policy being developed and become effective, with the target date being end of June, for the water feasibility work in terms of applying sort of a water supply distribution policy to the zone. The zone-wide assessment piece, where that work is underway, and in fact, we're going to see that transition more into September as the RFP for getting the scoping done for that piece is underway currently. And I think that'll be moving a little bit further down the timeline. So the focus in June will really be on that water supply and distribution policy. And that'll essentially help to provide guidance to our statutory decision makers on things like new intakes, and where they would be best positioned in the zone. We've also got a capital grant that we're really excited about to share with the Alberta Industrial Heartland Association that'll be made available to municipalities to look at preparing designs for water intakes that will fit with that operational policy moving into the future. In September, we expect to essentially be rolling out the final pieces or bigger pieces for the zone, knowing that there's a lot more work to be done beyond September, but the critical components that we see needing to be in place should be in place by the end of September. And that includes a directive, which essentially would house the standard terms and conditions. An example of that would be a topsoil or a suite of topsoil clauses that would be standard across facilities for the zone. For existing industry, of course, these would be voluntary for facilities to apply for the amendment to get that directive put in their approval. And for new facilities, this would be part of what they would see coming with their approvals in the future. The air emission standards and requirements, which will be basically an operational policy, again, only applicable to the industrial heartland, will be part of that, as well as the water quality management operational policy. And those will set out really the standards that would apply across the zone, and expectations. And then later on into the future, of course, planning beyond September, we'll be proceeding with that program development based on the recommendations of that feasibility study and the learnings from the pilot. And we'll also be looking for more efficiencies and regulatory changes down the line as we dovetail with DRAS for designated industrial zone applications, developing more of an over-the-fence power solutions operational policy, again, that would cover the zone in terms of the industrial heartland, and really looking at some opportunities for implementing the zone-wide assessment. So at this point, we do have capital funds that are identified for carrying out a zone-wide assessment that will serve as a baseline for the zone and essentially provide information to new and existing companies to be used for impact assessments, as well as understanding their own environmental management programs better in the context of the zone and the outcomes we're looking to achieve. So those are some of the bigger components, and of course, consolidating the multiple regulatory requirements into a single approach for the zone is really the holy grail, I think, for this exercise, and we're learning a lot from it. And we're also, along the way in terms of getting towards that more one window and single regulatory approach, we're understanding definitely the need and the nuances to ensure that we're bringing everyone along as we move on this fast-paced pilot. And with that, I'd say thank you very much, and certainly look forward to any questions at the end of the session here today.
Great. Thank you for joining us today, John, and for providing that special update on the designated industrial zone pilot project. So our final presentation today will be from Interpipeline. So please allow me to introduce Lorraine.
Thanks a lot, Sheena. The best part about going last is that actually there's super great key messages in every other of the presentations ahead of me, and I don't have to say those. So but I think I wanted to say before I started that John, I know that folks around and Michael opened up with it too, the collaborative, great government support that we get and the way that we can all work together is really impressive. And our staff here have said all kinds of great things about the DIZ process. And actually, specifically, John, you've got like a fan following. And we see such great, advancements, as you said, absolutely keeping the protection there, absolutely keeping the regulation there, but making sure everything makes sense. I think one of the things I think we're a great example of is that we received our APIA approval in 2013, and we're right now commissioning. The plan is to be up and running this summer, but that means we're almost 10 years into our 10-year approval, like we're ready for the 10-year renewal, and we haven't started up yet. And the kinds of changes that you've made in terms of phasing the approvals is fantastic and important, and I think makes just a ton of sense. So I will start my presentation by sharing my screen. And all right, hoping that's working, everybody. Let me know if it isn't.
Looks great.
Okay, thank you. The presenters will know I had quite a bit of trouble before we started. So like most people, I have to show the disclaimer, don't invest or not in Interpipeline, based on what I say. It makes it even more interesting now because we were acquired by Brookfield Infrastructure Group last summer, and you can no longer buy Interpipeline stock. So I'm not sure why I actually still have to show this little disclaimer at the front. Many of you know who Interpipeline is, probably by virtue of the fact that we're building the big new Heartland petrochemical complex near Fort Saskatchewan. But Interpipeline has four main business segments. Our transportation group, that's pipelines, both oil sands and conventional, largely in Alberta, a little bit in Saskatchewan, and about 7,000 kilometers of the pipeline. We have NGL processing facilities, both the conventional that you would have probably known about in Cochrane, the Cochrane extraction plant, and the oil sands off-gas gas processing, Pioneer 1 and Pioneer 2, connected to the Suncor and the Cienera facilities. We have a marketing division that is seeking to provide sort of value and logistics support to the products that we have. And we have the Heartland Petrochemical Complex. We have a strong presence in the Heartland. That's where while we do have those assets all over the province, the Heartland is our Heartland too. That's where the pipeline control room is in Sherwood Park. And the Heartland Petrochemical Complex, as we're going to talk a little bit more about, just outside of Fort Saskatchewan. There's about 400 employees between the two in terms of permanent employees. As we were constructing the complex over the last 4 years, we've had up around 4,500, 4,600 people coming and going off the plant site every day for construction, but it's going to normalize around 300 people when we get started. Dow made a great presentation on plastics and plastics research in action, and you covered a lot of those things, Michael, that I won't bother, but just to supplement, they're making polyethylene, we're making polypropylene. Polypropylene is, I think it's the second most demanded plastic in the world. It's, this plant is going to produce about 525,000 tons per year of polypropylene. And to put that into perspective, there are no other operating polypropylene plants in Canada right now. And our Canadian imports of polypropylene, so that we can produce the things that are made out of polypropylene into Canada, is around 500,000 tons per year. So this is not a one-for-one replacement. It's not that we won't be having any imports anymore, but just to give you sort of order of magnitude, this is how we're entering this market in North America and in the world. All the speakers have mentioned how we have this great abundance of feedstock here. In the messaging that you've heard about us talking about our polypropylene plant, we talk about the GHG footprint, greenhouse gas footprint of the polypropylene pellet and how it compares to those around the world. One of the big reasons is because we're using propane as a feedstock. And polypropylene is made in a lot of cases around the world as next to refining operations and using off byproduct gases and so on, or byproduct propylene. And whereas this is an on-purpose built to be integrated propane to polypropylene facility, the integration gets us GHG savings, use of propane as opposed to other heavier carbon products gets us GHG reductions. And then we have cogeneration turbines on site. They are sized to, they outsize our electricity requirements because they're sized for our steam requirements, the heat we need on site for the rest of the processes. So we actually are generating electricity and feeding it into the Alberta grid. So all those things together in that configuration, we've had a study done by IHS that just took a look at polypropylene being produced around the world, and our the Heartland in Canada can be proud that the GHG footprint of this new facility will be 65% lower than the global average and 35% lower than the North American average of a polypropylene pellet produced. We also had a buy and acquire in Alberta first, wherever we could, policy in procurement and hiring. So about 75% of the whole entire project spend was within Alberta. There were some specialty items we had to go overseas for, but what we could do here, we did here. Some of the best mod shops and steel manufacturers and so on were right here in Alberta, and we used them. 150 local businesses have been engaged over the process of the build, and as much as we can in operations, we will continue to engage local Heartland businesses. We have just about the entire production. I think we're just over 70% now of capacity is already in take or pay agreements. And that is, I think we might have one more. Oh, just this is the April drone picture. You can see up in the upper left is the river, the North Saskatchewan River. Along the left side and up around the top is our rail storage, rail lines and rail cars. The building that's right in the foreground where the rail cars are going into is the loading facilities and washing facilities. In the background, one building by one building I could tell you, but really the stuff that's on the close end is the polypropylene facilities, and the stuff that's on the farther side is the PDH or the propane dehydrogenation portion that takes the propane and turns it into propylene. And there's a connection, electrical connection up on that far side too. And we are right across, right in the, if up off the page underneath that white banner that says April 2022 would be where Shell Scotford is. So that's the location we're in. Yeah, here's it. So we are, it's fully constructed. We're doing commissioning and startup activities right now. Middle of the year, we'll be producing pellets. The first, when they talk about staggered startup, the first pellets we'll be producing will be from propylene that we actually already have been accumulating from our off-gas processes over in the caverns we have at the Redwater site. So we'll be using that propylene first to do the first pellets, and then the PDH and producing our own propylene will happen in the following months. We will be in full operating production. She always says that while she touches wood in 2023. Rail cars have already been tested, loaded with some pellets that we bought to bring onto site to make sure everything was working. So we are fully commissioned in the loading side, and we tested all of our business back office stuff at the same time so that we can sell and deliver and track our cars, et cetera, for our customers. We launched the brand. The brand of the pellets is called Heartland Polymers, and there's a lot of marketing been done. The markets for these pellets will be largely in the United States to begin with. They can be sold obviously offshore, but we've got a lot of customers lined up in the States. And so that's what we're doing. And the central utility block is now tied to the grid and producing. I'm going to just pile on a little bit to what Michael had to say about the partnership with NATE. Interpipeline started PREA, the Plastics Research and Action Program, with NATE with a $10 million endowment over a 10-year partnership. As Michael said, we're pleased to have Dow join us on the microplastic project. The microplastic project is the first phase of it is to actually just get a good baseline and a good understanding of what, pardon me, measuring and verifying and be able to scientifically establish a good baseline of what is in the North Saskatchewan River right now, what exists as a baseline. And then there are sort of phase 2 and phase 3 of this microplastic project to be able to measure and indicate any microplastics that are in processed water, et cetera. So we're also working with the government of Alberta, a Department of Environment, to talk about how we can share that information. We plan to share this information widely and publicly so that everyone can benefit from an understanding in that science, which is actually still quite new in terms of being able to, in a repeated, verified way, understand what is in the river. So NATE's our partner on that. And then the other fun stuff we're doing with NATE is a lot on recycled, keeping plastics out of the environment. So what can we do with waste plastic? There's a flooring experiment going on, some research going on how much recycled content you can put in 100% polypropylene flooring, luxury flooring, and how much recycled content can you put back into that flooring and have it be durable. There's an asphalt project on not just putting plastic, but actually converting the plastic waste, recycled plastic, into waxes that go into asphalt that would be able to withstand an Alberta climate specifically. And there's just other stuff that is interesting that we're trying to find out how we can take more recycled content out of landfills, keep it out of our environment, and keep it into useful projects. And I think it was Michael, maybe both, mentioned the circular economy. We want to make sure that we keep the value in plastics. Plastics is a valuable commodity, and we can keep using it again in different ways in our economy. We are one of the first Canadian members of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. It has similar objectives on a global scale. We are a founding member of the Plastics Alliance of Alberta, which also collaborates with government, industry, nonprofits. And we've made it, like most of the companies, I think, trying to think, all the companies on the call, members of the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada, and also committed then to responsible care, which is a responsible environment, social governance management model that we that keeps our communities clean and safe. Operation Clean Sweep is another one of those that comes in that same category of Chemistry Industry Association. We too love the Heartland. We live there. In the last 5 years, we've invested $2.8 million. We've had 1,700 employee volunteer hours to the local charities, local community engagement events. Just something really, it was just an interesting point. Just the bottle recycling on the HPC facility, we brought in $60,000 and invested it in food banks across the region, and Good Samaritan Society and the Mental Health Society. We have been engaging in business opportunities through that construction with Indigenous businesses, and hope to do much, much more, and in conversations ongoing. And the other one that we're particularly proud of is our engagement with the Women Building Futures. Over the last 3 years, Women Building Futures has been operating for over 20 years and doing a fabulous job, focused a lot in Edmonton. We wanted to see a focus out in the Heartland and in rural areas where we operate. And so we've been recruiting to that end. Pandemic put some challenges in our way, but we've done an expansion of the construction trades that we attract women into. And then we in Pembina have embarked on a new power engineering course for women through the Women Building Futures. And we're both holding positions for co-op students this summer for the women taking the power engineering course so they could get their STEAM time. And I think that is it for me. I wanted to say, I guess, one more thing that didn't appear in the slides. We are, like the other companies, planning a lot of engagement, and we're so happy to be out there now that we have a little bit more leeway pandemic-wise. But we are participating in something that the Alliance to End Plastic Waste also runs around the globe called Clean for Change. And we're going to be in communities throughout the Heartland on cleanup bees this with our field staff this next few weeks. Bruderheim on April 21st, which is tomorrow. Redwater May 4th. And there's going to be a community barbecue at noon, following the pickup on May 4th at Redwater. Lamont May 10th, Fort Saskatchewan May 11th, Sherwood Park and Calgary both on May 13th. So that's kind of it for me, Sheena, if there's any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Lorraine. And thank you for everyone who joined us online today. We are close to our time, so we may only get to 1 or 2 questions really quickly here. But again, if we don't answer your question live here, we will get them all answered and have the responses posted to the lifeintheheartland.com, along with copies of the presentations and a link to the recording. So I'll just pull up our questions here. So there's a question for John about environmental stewardship. So what environmental risk assessments have been conducted for designated industrial areas? And what is the environmental risk tolerance that is being used for industrial operations in this zone? If you're able to answer that on the spot, sorry.
Thank you, Sheena. So that's a bit more of a complex question. But essentially, the risk tolerance is the same for the industrial zone as it would be in other places of the province. In fact, it's probably a little bit less risky in terms of ensuring that we're protecting the environment, just because we have very strong monitoring programs, as well as being outcome based. And now we've also got, and I'm not sure if the person that asked the question is aware, the surface water quality management framework engagement that happened this past year, and that hasn't yet been implemented, but is expected to be this spring. That will also add to that level of stringency. So I think the short answer is the environmental risk is either as good or better in terms of protection within the zone. And in terms of the studies that have been completed within industrial zones, that it would be very variable by zone, but I know in the industrial heartland there is significant amounts of work underway both being undertaken by industry, government, non-government, and our municipal partners through their process as well.
Great, thanks, John. I see we're kind of over time here and losing people, so I don't want to take up much more time of people's afternoon, but we've recorded all the questions. Like I said, the responses will be posted onto our website, lifeintheheartland.com, as well as copies of the presentation. And if there are any other follow-up questions from today, please feel free to reach out to me directly at info@lifeintheheartland.com. And I'll be happy to get a response. Like I said, if you have any other follow-up questions or comments from today's event. So once again, thank you everyone for attending. This was a really great kind of opportunity for me to be out here and start engaging with our community. And yeah, I hope to see all of you and more at our next Life in the Heartland event. Thank you.